Easter Monday, everybody. I'm Audrey Williams. Question: what do most people do on Easter Monday? Well, for one, they don't go to work. Except for very few, most of us take advantage of the fact that it's a public holiday. We're a little more dedicated here at the JIS. Either way, we must eat, most likely fish, more commonly fried, and of course, bun and cheese. Then among those who venture outside the home, the beach seems to have a particularly powerful calling on this day. And even though Easter is a religious holiday period, Easter Monday is probably the most secular-leaning day, so many people will likely be heading to a party later. If any of these apply, we've got you covered on this special Monday edition of Jamaica Magazine. Thanks for making space in your day for us. Be right back.
Finger-licking jerk chicken, Helcher fish and bami, will run down yam and banana, roast breadfruit, sweet potato pudding. Jamaica food sweet. So let's make a pledge to use more local produce and less foreign goods. Let's grow what we eat and eat what we grow.
So, except for those adventurous souls who are into going to the beach at night, we figure most of you have already enjoyed that meeting of sand and sea today. Here's to hoping you got to wash away the worries of life. But did you leave the space in a good condition for others the way you found it? Not to sound preachy, but we do want to reinforce that keeping our coasts clean can be a matter of life and death.
Part in preserving our environment as much as possible. That's the reality.
Jamaicans love going to the beach, hardly surprising since we are a tropical island people. But we aren't the only fans. Among its many offerings, Jamaica's tourism landscape owes much to the appeal of our many miles of white sand beaches. Yet, although these gems of nature offer us both a place to play and earn, all too often, this is how we treat them.
From diapers to container covers, plastic, bottles, bags, you name it, it's out here.
According to the US-based non-profit environmental advocacy group Ocean Conservancy, our oceans sustain us with the basic elements of life, producing half of the oxygen in the air we breathe and serving as an essential part of the water cycle. Beaches are the frontier of this essential resource, providing habitat and nesting grounds for important ocean wildlife like sea turtles and seabirds, and helping to sustain complex coastal economies. It's why local organizations like the National Environment and Planning Agency and the Urban Development Corporation regularly organize exercises to clear our beaches of the debris so carelessly discarded.
The objective is really, most importantly, to raise the awareness amongst the general population about how our everyday activities affect our coastal resources. Because what we find is that when we dispose of garbage improperly, it ends up right back on the beach.
Don't litter, don't throw garbage in the sea, in the rivers, in gullies and stuff. Just keep the environment clean.
Because we want a clean environment to come in and play and swim.
Polluting our beaches with trash is not just an eyesore. It affects the health of people, wildlife, and economies. And what we do on land invariably ends up in the water. The result could be injury to swimmers and beachgoers, wildlife being harmed from eating or getting trapped in the garbage, boat propellers being ensnared, and tourists seeking more pristine environs to vacation.
It's very important because if all the garbage washes away into the sea, the marine animals will choke and they will die. and it will cause pollution.
The beaches are nature's gift to us, offering up a relaxing environment to get away from the stressors of life, enjoy them, and allow others to do the same.
Welcome to the FSC Minute. I am Nadine Newsom. Today we explore issues related to insurance, and my guest is Miss Rosemary Henry, Senior Director of Insurance with the FSC. Welcome to the FSC Minute, Miss Henry.
Thank you, Nadine.
Miss Henry, can an insurer cancel my insurance policy before notifying me?
By law, an insurer is required to provide notice to the insured before terminating a policy. This can be delivered or sent by mail to the last known address on file for the insured.
Can a company refuse to accept my application for the insurance of my motor vehicle?
A company can refuse an application for insurance if the individual is considered to be high risk. An example is where an individual have had several accidents in the recent past, they would consider to be high risk by that company.
And if my insurance company refuses to pay my claim, what are my options for a speedy resolution?
The matter may be referred to arbitration if all parties agree. Otherwise, the claimant can refer the matter to the FSC. The FSC will do their investigation where it has been established that the claimant has a right to settlement. The claimant also has the option to go to court.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. My guest today was Rosemary Henry, Senior Director of Insurance with the FSC. For the FSC Minute, I am Nadine Newsom.
What's your flavor? Bun or fish? Those are certainly tasty treats, but you know, this little island offers much more to tempt your taste buds. And right now we're peeking inside a pepper pot to check out some of the flavors of Jamaica.
It's a melting pot of cultures, cooking techniques, ingredients, flavors and spices from all who've had a hand in the making of the nation. Taino, Spanish, British, African, Chinese, Indian and others, shaping a national culinary palette that's more than 50 years in the making. Jamaica's cuisine has come a far way. The island now boasts dozens of fast food chains, oriental restaurants, all-natural eateries and indigenous food shops that serve a buffet of dishes.
I'm coming from an era during the colonial period when Jamaican food was looked down on.
As a young student in primary school, you couldn't take, if you take certain foods as lunch, you would have to hide that. For example, bami and egg or callaloo and saltfish or ackee and saltfish. You wouldn't want anybody to see that because it looks as if you are extremely poor.
Those days are behind us, and credit must go to government bodies like the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, which has been promoting the consumption of authentic Jamaican foods since its culinary competition in hotels was introduced in 1965.
They were restricted to local produce, and in doing so, they were able to come up with some very creative combination.
With these dishes added to the hotel's regular menus, tourists quickly developed a taste for the local cuisine, and the stigma attached to Jamaican foods at the turn of independence began to dissipate. This fed into the local agricultural sector, prompting more farmers to plant the foods that were the staples of their multi-ethnic culinary inheritance.
When we roast the yam, when we roast the yam.
Do you like roast yam? You're not alone. Many Jamaicans have acquired a taste for this particular dish, and they didn't have to look far for its creation. Roasting is a centuries-old cooking style that Jamaicans owe to the Taino peoples that once occupied this land. Just 50 years ago, it was still a time-consuming, more labor-intensive practice of roasting ground provisions and meats in the earth.
They even roast the fish in the earth, and then they scrape it off.
Now, Jamaicans from all walks of life are roasting over grills, on meat sheets, in less time, but with as much flavor as their ancestors. Since the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the 15th century, Spanish flavors have been spicing up Jamaican pots on a regular basis. One particular cooking style and its most popular creation has made a big impression.
We in Spain, we fry a lot. There is definitely the one dish that has a clear connection with Spain, which is the escovitch.
Empanada to the Spanish, patty to Jamaicans. Since the late 1970s to early 1980s, this meat-filled dough dish has been another favorite.
The concept is very much the same. The difference would be, and there is again a mixture of other cultures. In this regard, I guess the British and the Indians, the filling.
Thanks to a blossoming Spanish presence in the local accommodation sector, especially since the 1990s, there is a resurgence of Spanish flavors and cooking styles on the Jamaican culinary scene. As the local cattle industry beefed up its output in the 1960s, Jamaicans wholeheartedly reclaimed one of their favorite pre-independence imports. Now on a Saturday, there is hardly a household that is not cooking either the popular beef soup or one of its other variations. The British like to boil, and it's from them that we've adopted this cooking method to serve up a wide array of dishes that are uniquely Jamaican. Hot as it is, Jamaicans love their teas, and while traditional English flavors were the popular choices for about the first 2 decades of independence, industrious Jamaicans have more recently been bagging indigenous and African-inspired flavors. It could have been the love for teas by the English that prompted then-Governor Sir Nicholas Laws to plant coffee seedlings in the island back in the 1700s. From the first plant in Temple Hall, St. Andrew, the Blue Mountain Coffee is now a global brand. Have your tea or coffee with a side of sweet cake, pie or bun, and savor one of the Brits' best gifts to their former colony. With about 90% of the Jamaican population claiming African heritage, it's easy to see why the continent gets credit for most of what we eat. But there was a time when claiming that particular heritage was not for popular consumption.
You wouldn't find bami being sold in the supermarket in the 60s or late 70s.
Green bananas were a no-no if you're sort of, you know, it was a very peasant thing and you couldn't say that you're eating green bananas.
No more. Today, Jamaicans of all ethnicities delight in their prickled or corned meats, mackerel rundown, and yes, the many faces of bami and banana, green, ripe, boiled, fried, however you want it. What would the Jamaican diet look like without the maroons?
They would catch the wild hog. They would prepare that wild hog, and they would dig a hole, and they put the fire in the earth in the hole, and they would set up a wooden grill over that hole and anchor these sticks with stones and so on. And then they would have the pig on that pimento, green pimento wood that is anchored over that hole, and that was how they would roast the pig. After they season it, of course, with bird pepper and pepper elder.
And from the hole emerged the most popular maroon gift to the dinner plate, jerk.
In the 1980s, you could only get jerk pork in Portland. Only at the Port Antonio market on a Saturday when the Maroons used to go there to sell it. And then afterwards, I think one of the Maroons was started the stand at Boston.
Giving us the widely popular Boston jerk pork and its many challengers from all across the island.
The truth is, over the last 50 years, we have had a major integration of Indian culinary arts into Jamaican art.
The most popular integration is not a specific dish, it's a spice. While Jamaicans tend to rub it on the meat and the Indians are more likely to put it in hot oil, everyone agrees curry is a much appreciated import from the Asian continent.
Now in Jamaica we are very adventurous. We like to go beyond what we are accustomed to. So we move from curry goat to curry chicken, and all sorts of things are being curried too.
The Jamaican restaurant sector has been steadily growing since independence, with Chinese eateries becoming one of the strongest forces. And as a result,
the Jamaicans have come to embrace the Chinese cuisine because it's good.
But you know Jamaicans, sometimes we cook the Chinese thing at home with the soya sauce, but we have to throw a little jerk seasoning in it and what have you, because it's a combination of flavors.
Organic. It's the hippest food term of the 21st century. But what is now a trend for many has been a staple for the Rastafarian community since the birth of the faith.
But when Rasta say ital food and no deaders and no flesh and face and bone, and people used to look at it as corn and say breeze go blow away, and you know, up to now no breeze no blow away. You see, if you have the proper combination of seasoning in your pot and the proper timing, you don't need to use the salt and the other little artificial thing.
Many Jamaicans still cook with salt, and meats remain a constant, but the healthy lifestyle pushed decades ago by the Rastafarian community is now a well-accepted and celebrated way to live. So, had your fill? But what about the drink? No Jamaican cookbook could be complete without this chapter. Whether it stems from a fruit or it's brewed in a lab, Jamaicans love to imbibe.
So ginger beer, to lemonade, and then we have sorrel. And we have been making a lot of drinks with our fruits, like soursop punch, and we make breadfruit punch, and sorrel, and at Christmas time there's egg punch.
Now that is the perfect cap on a multi-ethnic menu, fit for the most Irie people in the world. With influences from the east to the west and the encouragement of a few key groups and agencies, Jamaica's culinary heritage has evolved into a true melting pot of cultures.
Sunday is a family day. We like cook together, talk, share ideas and help each other. We reason about things.
I spend quality time with my family every day.
It is very important because at the end of the day you have children around you and you have to show them that okay, this is the foundation, this is the way it's supposed to be.
They keep the family together and in line, you know, and especially with the boys.
Don't know about you, but after looking in that pepper pot earlier, I'm hungry. We're about halfway through the show, so I'll be satisfying my appetite soon. And in a few hours, I've got a party to go to where I'm likely to mingle with some business colleagues. If you've ever been to one of those, you might know it's a tricky balance between letting loose and maintaining decorum. So I got some advice. That's next.
It is always best to know what should not be done at one of these functions.
Maintenance of decorum, proper decorum. We are ladies, and therefore the most important thing is to behave like a lady at all times. Be aware of what you should and should not say. And in the world of diplomacy, you know, that's the first thing that you have to learn. I think what you mustn't do is be worried about the fact that you may not know. All you do is watch, you know. Look at how someone else is holding their glass. Look at how someone else is using their knife and fork. So just watch and follow.
Chief State Protocol Advisor, Ambassador Eleanor Sherlock, says exhibiting professionalism and personal decorum at social events will form part of how that person is perceived. Functions or parties provide excellent networking opportunities. With this in mind, patrons or partygoers must be aware that a potential business partner or a prospective employer could be standing right next to you as you stagger around with a drink in hand, speak with food in your mouth, and badmouth the boss. Here are some of the most common mistakes people make. What is not yours, simply leave it alone. You will always be remembered for that outlandish outfit. Disregard the Jamaican notion of always being late. Though it's a delectable affair or there is a buffet line and an open bar, it's provided for everyone at the party. Now that you are aware of the don'ts of party protocol, here are some pointers to ensure that you dance away from the event feeling professional and rewarded. Be informed of the company or person hosting the event. Mix and mingle. Shed the shy girl or laid-back dude attitude and meet people. There may be a potential business partner or prospective employer inside the dance room. Walk with business cards. If you don't have the time to generate one, ensure that you have a pen and paper on you.
Reputation lost is never again regained, and one needs to have their personal dignity, and dignity comes with how you conduct yourself. And that's why I think it's important for decorum.
Thanks for sticking around. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Before I head out to enjoy the offerings of this Easter Monday, there is one more important issue I want to discuss: road safety. It's certainly important every day, but as these statistics show, every year the message definitely bears repeating on public holidays like this one. So please, spare a few minutes for our next feature.
So, most of our road accident victims belong to the 20 to 39 age group. And when we lose them, families lose breadwinners and productivity levels drop significantly. But economic activity is not the only thing affected by road accidents and fatalities. Survivors have to be treated and they demand some serious medical resources. Kenny Otero of the Road Safety Unit will be joining us, and he'll be helping us to crunch those figures. Calm and beautiful, isn't it? Quite the opposite of what happens in our A&E departments.
Right about that.
Well, give us a little about your experience.
Traffic collisions forces a lot of our patients, passengers, drivers to end up in hospitals. What you find happening is that these road users suffer from all different types of injuries. For example, motorcyclists. A lot of our motorcyclist fatalities are due to head injuries. No helmet, pedal cyclists also. We find even drivers and passengers themselves having that issue of being killed as a result or injured.
When these persons go to the accident and emergency units now and they might have a surgery, does it have any impact at all on what happens at the hospital?
Definitely, disrupt the entire hospital system. Hospital personnel have to be called from their homes. What it does, it forces the hospital to delay cancer surgery, kidney surgery, liver surgery. And you can think about a mammoth of other issues that the hospital have to delay in order to attend to something that they never planned for.
What about resources to get persons to and from the hospital from the crash sites?
Pressure is placed on the ambulance sector of the health sector to attend to the crash site to remove persons injured or killed, depending on the circumstances. We shouldn't have to be contending with the fact that we have to now procuring more ambulances to deal with traffic crashes. We wouldn't know the right thing, so we must do the right thing, and the stress on the medical sector is enormous.
And I'm happy you mentioned stress because I'm sure that payments, you have to make other payouts to these hospital workers.
You're going to have to work them overtime. There's a cost on the state. And we don't need that. We already have many issues to deal within the health sector and traffic crashes. This thing is about ranking number 2. In some health regional authorities, it is number 2, right? And if we're not careful, this thing will spiral out of control.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to say, but this is where we part ways for the day. If you want to talk to us about anything in the program and you think the internet is cool, connect with us through our Twitter, Facebook, and email accounts. We're also streaming on YouTube and our very own website at jis.gov.jm. I'm Audrey Williams, wishing you a safe and happy Easter.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.